It's the internet. You're busy. Let's do this for November 28th, 2022. For the next hour or so, let me help you sort through the world of gaming on Game Mess Mornings Live with me, Jeff Grubb. Today, the only good bug is a dead bug. But first, please join me in welcoming today's co-host to Game Mess Mornings. It's Andy Robinson, everybody. Andy, how are you doing?
Hello, how are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm glad to have you
very good
here.
also, mate. I mean, obviously enjoying the World Cup, the football/soccer World Cup.
Yeah, are you enjoying it? I get a lot of anxiety from a lot of teams that have traditionally been very good. Seems like there's been a lot of upsets, especially the other day. A ton of upsets. Are you feeling good going into the next game?
It's weird from a lot of perspectives, right? Like the time of the year it's being held, the place that it's being held. I think without going into too much kind of soccer detail, I think the British have always, or the English, I should say, since we're enemies when it comes to soccer.
Correct.
There's always been this hang up that because we've got such a competitive league in England, that by the time the World Cup rolls around in the summer, all of our players are exhausted. That was the theory anyway. So the theory was, oh wow, finally we can, be at 100%. But anyone who watched the game between USA and England the other day can see that that's not quite happened based on that one. Yeah, I think it was one of the worst international games I've seen.
Yeah.
But fingers crossed. We started slow last time.
I think they're going to get out of the group stage, no problem. I also think United States is going to beat out Iran, and so hopefully we'll be able to face each other again. I think that'll be fun. I thought it was a very good game.
It was awful.
Yeah, I thought it was very good. Although I would have loved to see United States scoring some of that pressure they had, but didn't happen. All right, let's get into this show. But before we do, let's explain ourselves and what we do here. Each weekday, I, Jeff Grubb, will help piece your gaming life back together. That includes breaking news and maybe some of our own original reporting. For all these topics, I'll get the input of a bona fide expert who will make me look smart. If you are watching live on Twitch, welcome. Hello, Twitch. You can always listen to the show later on podcast feeds by searching for Game Mess Mornings, or find the RSS on giantbomb.com. Shout out to the RSS gang out there. You can also catch the show later with chapters and timestamps on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. All right, we have a lot to get into, so let's start the morning mess with: the feds are likely to challenge Microsoft's $69 billion Activision takeover. This comes from Josh Cisco at Politico. The Federal Trade Commission is likely to file an antitrust lawsuit, according to this story, to block Microsoft's $69 billion takeover of the video game giant Activision Blizzard, which is the maker of hit games like Call of Duty and Candy Crush Saga. And this is according to 3 people with knowledge of the matter. A lawsuit would be the FTC's biggest move yet under new chair Lena Khan to rein in the power of the world's largest technology companies. It would also be a major black mark for Microsoft, which has positioned itself as a white knight of sorts on antitrust issues in the tech sector after going through its own grueling regulatory antitrust battles around the world more than 2 decades ago. A lawsuit challenging the deal is not guaranteed, and this is still according to the story, and the FTC's 4 commissioners have yet to vote out a complaint or meet with lawyers for the companies. And that's according to 2 people. However, the FTC staff reviewing the deal are skeptical of the company's arguments, and that's both companies. It's not like one or the other. It's referring here to both Microsoft and Sony. Or I guess here it would probably be both Microsoft and Activision. So that's where they're skeptical, and that's probably why the story says they're leaning towards doing it. But the investigation remains ongoing, but much of the heavy lifting is completed, including depositions of Microsoft chief executive Satya Nadella and Activision head Bobby Kotick, and that's according, again, to the people with knowledge of the investigation. The FTC declined to comment. Andy, what do you think? Is this just... this new FTC clearly wanting to lay down the law? I was kind of surprised to read this because they are doing some test case right now with much smaller deals, but it seems like they're not going to let that stop them. They're going to throw their head into the arena here and try to do something about this acquisition. What do you think's happening?
I mean, it does seem they're kind of creeping towards demanding some sort of concession, doesn't it? I mean, whenever we talk about this, none of us kind of claim to be lawyers, right?
No.
So we are, doing the best with the kind of the educated opinions that we see and understand. And it does seem to be the case that they are going to do that. I mean, it seemed from what I read that there would be some surprise if it actually led to, going into court, because that seems a bit unnecessary when they could just say to Microsoft, like, look, we want you to, for example, guarantee that Call of Duty will always be on PlayStation. But again, that sounds a bit messy because, as Microsoft have mentioned in its own responses, how do you define that? What if PlayStation is a cloud platform in 10 years' time? What if it is a completely different thing? So, I mean, certainly from what you're seeing on the UK side as well, which I get the impression they're more concerned about, because the UK, the EU, and the US are the main kind of regulators who could potentially put a stick in the mud for this. That it seems to be edging that way, right? Like everyone's kind of it's if you actually read through the documents, it's quite funny to see everyone like kind of plead to the victim.
Yes.
Like PlayStation's like, if Call of Duty goes away, then PlayStation will cease to exist. Like, we are only Call of Duty, whereas Microsoft's like, Call of Duty sucks. It's not even Activision's biggest thing. Like, people don't even tweet about Call of Duty. It's not even, it doesn't win any Game of the Year awards.
But we've also never even made a good game ever, and so we kind of need this to even be able to compete. And it's like, wait, what? So this is a thing where we've been hearing this from the UK. Now we're hearing it from the FTC. I get the impression from the FTC, at least, that they think it would be weird to let a $69 billion acquisition go through without any hurdles. And it probably would be. It probably would be weird, especially if you are Khan, who is this new FTC chair, who is supposed to be the one that's going to start laying down the law. All that said, I think that they will probably encounter a situation where if they do bring I guess I don't know if it would be a suit, but if they bring the investigation to bear down on Microsoft and Activision here, likely they probably would just ask for concessions, similar to what happened with Disney acquiring Fox and not being able to take Fox Sports in because they already owned ESPN. So it's like they would probably, and that would be like the most extreme case, I think, honestly.
I think I mentioned the last time I was on here that I understand that the biggest concern is basically around the services and cloud area, which both the UK and the FTC have noted is a concern for them, because that's the big question mark. I mean, you can really kind of iron out whether or not Call of Duty matters in the console space, but obviously cloud, who knows where that's going to be in 10 years' time. And as kind of Phil Spencer said himself recently, that's really the appeal for them, that the big numbers are being done from the Activision Blizzard as an entire entity are being done on mobile, with Candy Crush, with Call of Duty Mobile, kind of with Blizzard stuff as well. And I don't actually think they're that bothered. I really don't think they're bothered about it being on PlayStation. Call of Duty being on PlayStation owned by Microsoft is a big win for Microsoft, because it's a big Game Pass advertisement.
Yep.
Which is interesting. That was kind of the new flavor I saw in these recent responses to, I think it was the CMA, whatever the recent responses were that came out last week, that you saw some of that creeping in, where Sony was like, well, they won't let us put PlayStation Plus on Xbox. So why should we, kind of let Game Pass come on here? And there was just a lot more kind of conversation about the implications of from a subscription point of view were creeping into those responses, and I found that interesting.
I think it is the place where they have to begin making the arguments, because video gaming is very competitive. It just flat out is super competitive, and this acquisition is not going to change the landscape on that side of things, where so a new developer is going to be able to make a game, put it out on early access on Steam, and it could turn into the next $1 billion, $10 billion game. That happens all the time. It's going to keep happening regardless of what happens between Microsoft, Activision, and Sony. But you're right, the undetermined future of cloud streaming is like, well, would this give Microsoft a chance to undercut and prevent Sony from establishing themselves here? And it's, well, I mean, yeah, maybe, but there were other players, and Sony has had a chance to establish itself in cloud gaming for years and years and hasn't taken it too seriously. And so it's kind of like feels like, well, should we be stopping Microsoft from being able to compete even more on that side just because Sony hasn't really figured it out so far? And also, in general, it's a weird argument to be like, okay, Sony needs this outside company to be able to compete. Like they need access to that. Like if we don't have that, we cannot actually go toe-to-toe with anyone. And so, well, I mean, it's a company you don't own. They're allowed to do business the way they want, and they're allowed to sell themselves if they want, or they should be. And it'd be weird if this third party, in this case being Sony, was able to step in and prevent that just because they need that. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And at the same time, obviously, the Microsoft's agreement that we're going to keep putting Call of Duty on there, which, like as you said, makes a ton of sense for Microsoft. They're going to get 7 out of every $10 of Call of Duty that's sold on PlayStation. They don't mind that. It gives them such a big bargaining chip when they sit down at the table. And Sony is like, hey, well, we actually will talk to you now because you own Call of Duty. What do you need? And Microsoft would be like, yeah, that's one of the reasons we did this for sure. That's the real reason it feels like Sony doesn't want to, because when they end up giving a little bit of money to Activision for all of the PlayStation Plus that Call of Duty sells, they don't want to then hand that over to Microsoft now. That really would stick in their craw. But it does seem like, for the most part, this deal probably still will go through, although I do think it's trending in the direction of concessions will be bigger than they were before, right?
It does feel like he's getting sidetracked a little bit because, from what I understand, the letter of the law, this is about whether Microsoft as a cloud entity in 10 years' time becomes, something you just can't compete with if it owns, one of the biggest entertainment franchises in existence. It's not about whether this is going to hurt PlayStation, because it's definitely going to hurt PlayStation. As you say, they are allowed to sell themselves and they're allowed to do what they want.
Yeah, but like it's such a hard thing to determine, right? Like, will this create a monopoly in the future? Is this market even going to be something that pans out? Everyone assumes it will be. But it hasn't so far. It's been something mostly ignored by most people, and the audience that Microsoft and Sony and all these companies talk about when they talk about cloud gaming, they're already playing stuff on their phone and happy with that. And it's just and they're not streaming a lot of stuff from the cloud when they're doing such a thing. So it's going to be that would also be pretty strange if it does seem like you're right that will be the turning point. But it'll be weird if that's the turning point because it seems so inconsequential today. But these regulators have the right to look into it and try to make a determination, and we'll see how it goes down. All right, let's move on. Actually, there's a little bit more here. Activision CCO reacted to this speculation on Twitter. Lulu Xiang-MSFT on Twitter said, "Seen a lot of speculation about Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard. Any suggestion that the transaction could have anti-competitive effects is absurd. This merger will benefit gamers and the U.S. gaming industry, especially as we face stiffer competition from abroad." I think, obviously, they also went on to say that they're going to fight this and fight anything that the FTC might throw down. So that, Activision and Microsoft's lawyers working together to make sure the deal goes through. That's not too surprising. There's billions of dollars on the line, and it's people who are in charge of these companies' job to make sure this deal does go through. But it is like, okay, now the gloves are sort of coming off even on Activision's side of things. We've seen Phil Spencer and Jim Ryan in the press going back and forth a ton. Now it seems like, okay, everyone involved on all sides is going to get involved in the fight now because they kind of can't help it. They have to. All right, let's move on to Off-World Industries is making Starship Troopers Extermination for 2023. This comes from Dean Takahashi at GameSpeak. Off-World Industries is making Starship Troopers Extermination as a squad-based co-op shooter that will come out in 2023. This is in collaboration with Sony Pictures Consumer Products, which is a fantastic name. Off-World Industries is making it's a 12-player squad-based co-op first-person shooter, and it's inspired by the 1997 Starship Troopers film, which was based on the 1959 sci-fi novel. The title will arrive on Steam Early Access on PC in 2023. In the game, you can pick one of a few classes. It will feature 12 players in squads of 4 working together to take on aliens and complete objectives and gather resources. That sounds like a pretty cool game for a franchise that I love, but it is from 1997 at this point. And obviously, there was direct-to-video movies that came out afterwards. It's just weird to see like where IP-driven games is going these days, where it's like, okay, even something from 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we're still going to keep bringing that back because IP just drives everything here. Were you surprised to see this one?
Oh, it's another good old boomer shooter, isn't it?
Yes,
I knew
I'm down for that.
I was thinking about before I came on, going, I bet we're going to talk about the Starship Troopers game because I love that film.
Yeah, me too.
We're the right age, right?
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit as well. Like these games are maybe. I mean, I'm not familiar with this developer, to be honest. But maybe these games are a bit easier to make when they're based on an existing IP, especially when you're kind of like building a new team. it just naturally makes the process a bit easier when you know, okay, right, so it's going to be squad based, and then this fits into this element of the movie, and then we're going to go here, here, and here, and this is what the enemy is going to be like, and maybe it makes that a little bit easier. I don't know. I'm not experienced in doing that myself, but yeah, this sounds like an absolute no-brainer, right?
Yeah,
Squad-based co-op shooter.
And it's from the developer of Squad, is actually what Off-World Industries is known for.
Right, okay.
And Squad's a pretty good sort of Counter-Strike-like that has a lot of great squad elements of teams working together cooperatively to accomplish goals, and you kind of paste Starship Trooper stuff on top of that. I'm here for that. Now, for me, the movie is such a work of satire, and it's all that stuff is super important to me when I watch the film. I don't know how much a game can or even should attempt to capture that stuff. I suppose if they go for it, it wouldn't hurt to have a lot of like flavored text and incidental dialogue that reinforces those notions. But I wouldn't want them to go too heavy-handed because games tend to struggle with those things. But regardless, like that's still a fun setting and a fun concept. And I think the military iconography that Starship Troopers had in that film is a good playground for this sort of game. And I wouldn't mind spending time with my friends in there. It's especially if it's the kind of game where jump in and have a good time, and everyone kind of knows what they need to do.
It feels like another one of those kind of switch your brain off and catch up with your friends sort of game, right?
Yes, and I kind of can't get enough of those. So yeah, even if it's like we're only gonna play it a couple times, for me, at this point, I'm like, that's fine with me. Especially like going in early access, there's something about that for these kinds of online multiplayer games where they grow alongside the audience, and I don't necessarily care about, I get to have my feedback heard by the developer. I never do that. It's just not something I partake in. But just watching the game grow and sort of react organically to what players are doing, I think that's a good fit for this game as well. Street Fighter 6 secures an age rating in South Korea. This comes from Vicky Blake at Eurogamer. Street Fighter 6 has been rated in South Korea, as spotted by the eagle-eyed folks at Reset Era. The fighting game, which as yet does not have a firm release date beyond a very vague 2023 window, has secured a 15 age rating due to its expression of physical damage shown in illustrations in addition to basic fighting expression, which is the quote from the age rating. While this doesn't necessarily mean the game release is around the corner, it does intimate that it probably will get it's set to drop in the next 6 months or so. Andy, I've heard that like when I haven't paid too much attention to this in the past, but I'm like, it's getting the age rating in South Korea. When does that mean it's coming out? And people have told me it's like 2 or 3 months, right?
Yeah, I actually covered this at the weekend.
Okay.
And I think it depends how hot they're coming in, I guess.
Yeah.
I believe Horizon Zero Dawn was rated in South Korea 3 months before it came out. But God of War Ragnarok was rated 6 months before it came out.
Okay.
So the key to this story really is that I believe in Capcom's recent earnings release, it said it had one major title left for its fiscal year, which is obviously Resident Evil 4.
Right.
So that would suggest that this is not coming before the end of March.
Yes, that definitely would.
But the rating certainly would suggest it could, because of the time spans that I just mentioned. So I guess and also Capcom do typically like to drop things at the start, right?
Yeah, February is a big time for them. They've done big stuff in January in recent years. It's kind of what I was thinking too, but I think that the fiscal outlook is probably more reliable in there, and there's no reason that this couldn't also mean early summer. Spring, early summer. This game could still come then, totally.
That would be my guess. I think Monster Hunter Rise came out then, I think, like right at the start of the summer.
I'm going to say like
May time, maybe?
April-ish, May. That sounds right. Yeah.
That sounds about right for this, like based on the evidence that we're looking at.
I'm just, I was kind of hoping, like, man, sometime before March, that would be very exciting early in the year, get hands on this. I'm excited for this game. It looks like a ton of fun. But I guess just this being a good sign that the game is on track and they aren't just saying 2023 because they don't really know when it's coming. This to me says they probably do, and they're confident. And I think the deal when you said coming in hot, a 6 month, if this is 6 months before it comes out, to me that says, this is in a good place. They have enough stuff to show. They're confident things aren't going to change. Things are locked down. So, I guess maybe we could hope for another play test before now and then. But at the very least, we're not going to be waiting more than about half a year to actually get hands on with the final
perhaps
release.
perhaps it suggests we might hear something at the Game Awards. The timing seems to be right.
Yes, I think that's probably correct. I mean, at this point, it's hard to pin down exactly what will be at the Game Awards, but I think that this does feel like one that should show up and might even get a release date. They've continued to say 2023. It's probably time for them as we go into 2023 to put an actual month and day on there as well. GameStop's website is reportedly showing customer data, including addresses. This comes from our buddy Andy Robinson at VGC. Retailer GameStop has reportedly leaked customer information, including billing addresses and payment history. This is according to multiple users on social media. For a period of time on Saturday, customers were being shown other users' information when refreshing their order pages. It's not clear if this includes full credit card numbers, but one user shared an image showing a partial number. GameStop did respond to this. Andy, you reached out, and they said GameStop's customer care team has responded, claiming that the addresses and names appearing in the customers' accounts were part of a test and, quote, not actual customer data. This was immediately fixed the same day it took place. This was test data created by our teams, not actual customer data. However, an online search suggests that some of the names and addresses that were shown to customers on its website could match real people. And then you guys asked if the real address data was being used. Have you heard anything back from them since asking that?
I have not. This is actually their customer service team who replied on that front. Their media team has not commented at all thus far. But obviously, as you mentioned, it's been a holiday recently and stuff, so I don't know if that affects it. But so the situation basically is that people noticed on their account page on the website that the data that was being served wasn't theirs. That includes addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, and kind of partial credit cards, so like the last four numbers. So anecdotally, people were replying to our story saying, well, this is not true, because I think somebody said that they phoned the phone number that was served and asked them, is this your credit card number? And they said it was. There were other people who said they emailed these people, but that's obviously all anecdotal. However, since I published this, I've had lots of kind of readers have sent who kind of saw this issue, experienced this issue. They sent me images of the data that came up, and let me tell you, it's definitely not. If it's test data, they're using real people in their test data. Because these are real names of people who you can Google and bring up their LinkedIn and see that they don't work for anyone associated with GameStop. So obviously the next link of this is to obviously get in touch with some of these people and have them confirm whether they're part of some test, which I'm in the process of doing. But this is not test data. I think they've screwed up here.
Yeah, and
it's screwed up here.
And it's like you said, it's the customer support team, and they probably speaking out of turn here. Probably not, or getting wires crossed with some other thing that probably was using test data and not knowing what you were talking about. But yeah, that's not how test data would work. You would not use real data.
Test on a live website?
Yes, exactly. Yes, that would be moving it to live would just be something that they wouldn't do. Yes, this is all a bug, and yeah, maybe it is fixed now. I guess is this still happening? I know the customer service.
Not to my knowledge. It doesn't look like it was happening for longer than a few hours. So it does seem like it was fixed, but this is not test data.
No,
in my opinion, it's not.
Yes, just the fact that people were able to call up the number, that's just not how test data would work. Absolutely not. I'm sure we will probably hear from GameStop officially on this pretty soon. Now that you're right, the holiday's over. GameStop's based in Texas. I'm sure they were off for Thanksgiving. Still not great though. They probably should have, while this fire was happening, they were putting it out. They probably should have had some actual communication about it. That's like best practices now when companies have like hacks or accidental breaches, is to admit it first thing. It's it goes back to, I remember my mom always told me, aspirin accidentally had poison in the bottle, and what they did is they just admitted it and they told everybody, and they came out right away and apologized and did everything they could to make things right. And it's the best PR case for how to handle stuff like that. And it's been best practices for decades now, and letting it go by and only having a quote from customer service is just going to make them look worse in the long run. So,
I mean, as someone correctly notes in the comments on Twitch, I believe they were deleting threads from the GameStop subreddit as well, which I'm not sure if that's if the official one. I don't think
right. It's always impossible to know, like, if the mods on Reddit are like actual GameStop employees. Typically, it's not how it works, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it is official employees, and they have, or at least some employees are on the mod team and are able to do that. And that's it's not great. All right. Polyphony Digital is considering releasing Gran Turismo on PC. This comes from Jordan Greer at GT Planet. Some of Sony's biggest franchises have already made their way to the platform, including Sony Santa Monica's God of War, Insomniac Games' Spider-Man, and Naughty Dog's Uncharted 4, with more expected to follow. Naturally, this has led many to speculate if Polyphony Digital's Gran Turismo series could also be making the jump. And we were curious, and this is again Jordan Greer at GT Planet, to ask Yamauchi-san if that was something he would consider. And he replied, yes, I do think so, but there were some caveats to that. Gran Turismo is a very finely tuned title, Yamauchi-san explained. There are not many platforms which could run the game in 4K 60p natively, so one way we make that possible is to narrow down the platform. It's not a very easy subject, but of course we are looking into it and considering it. Now, he says all that, but this game already runs on the PlayStation 4. This was a cross-gen title. It wasn't planned as a cross-gen title originally. It seemed like they ended up shipping it as one. So they've done some optimizations to make it run on PlayStation 4. Of course, it's not 4K 60 there, but if they move it to PC, they're not going to be able to tell people you have to run it at 4K 60. They will have to include visual options and graphical options. So I think this is him just saying, listen, we are working on the optimizations, but that's where we're at right now. This game,
and I believe
coming to PC.
I believe I was told at the time, because obviously when they were originally marketing GT7, they were calling it a PS5 exclusive. And I do believe at the time I was told that decision was actually made quite late. To bring it to PS4, obviously the pandemic was going on, people couldn't get a PS5, so it's understandable that they made that decision. But as you say, so the work to kind of retrograde that has been done from that perspective. I believe that this was also in the NVIDIA leak, the GeForce leak, one that was listed on there, which again is another flag. And even if you didn't have this evidence, right? Sony's bringing everything. To PC now, right? Like, I mean, even since they released this game earlier in the year, I think they've brought what Sackboy, Uncharted, Spider-Man, the sequel,
Miles Morales,
yeah. I mean, obviously you've got Returnal that's clearly sat there ready to drop as well. So it makes complete sense, right? Especially with the ridiculous microtransactions in this game. There's a lot of moolah to be made from slapping it on Steam, I imagine.
Yeah, and PC audience is a pretty heavy racing audience. It fits. I guess the question is like how quickly, because this game did come out in 2022. It was a 2022 release. I think it would not surprise me if we're playing this game on PC by next year, 2023, late 2023 probably. But I think when they were doing the effort to port it down to PS4 at the time, they probably were thinking about PC at that moment. I'm sure there's more work happening now, but by that point, the conversations were already happening that Sony's like, hey, we are moving more things to PC, so be thinking about that. And now they have Nixies, and I'm sure that's probably helping as well. But yeah, I think this is one of those games that does come more quickly to PC than some of the other ones. Like, I guess I wouldn't be surprised if we get through 2023 without Ratchet and Clank, although that also seems like it should be by the end of 2023 on PC. But I think
they're going to port that?
Ratchet and Clank? I think yes, I think they'll port Ratchet and Clank, yes.
I would have thought that was the only one that they probably couldn't.
You think because it's like they're one of their big only... I mean, Demon's Souls also, like, I guess these are the PS5 exclusives. Are they going to move to PC, you think?
The proper exclusives. Yeah, I mean, obviously Ratchet and Clank is the big kind of... the big song and dance game about the SSD and kind of teleporting over immediately. And I'd be surprised if they brought that without some kind of significant compromises. I mean, I'm not ruling anything out anymore because it seems like those days of the big PS5 exclusive utilizing all the features are long behind us, which I think is quite disappointing.
Yes.
After kind of Mark Cerny's big kind of SSD sell about how it could transform the worlds designed in the games and stuff, and then now it's like, well, we've got to slap it on everything, so that's over. So that is a shame. As for GT, I mean, what we're guessing, right? But I mean, I'm looking at Returnal, and that came out a year and a half ago, maybe, and that's not here yet. I mean, it looks like from the Steam kind of back end, the updates, it looks like it could drop
actively working
any
on
time
it.
they want it, because that's what they did with Sackboy. They were updating kind of the back end on Steam, and then it came out like pretty quickly after they announced it. So I would be surprised based on that if I saw it before the end of next year, certainly. But who knows?
Right. Yeah. I think that you're right, because these games that have come out recently have been in the back end for going on a year, right?
In some case, a year. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, so if that's been their process so far, they probably, I guess we could expect it to continue. But Return almost certainly coming out before the end of the fiscal year. It feels like they want to get every game they have in the hopper onto PC, because to hit that big number of $300 million that they said they would hit on PC this year. I mean, between Spider-Man, Miles Morales, Uncharted, they're probably getting pretty close. I suppose Uncharted didn't do as well on PC as Spider-Man.
No, I don't think it did so well. No.
Yeah, but it's like, so that kind of just speaks to they probably will keep putting out more and more and more. But I think we'll probably start seeing the games come quicker to PC in general going forward, especially as these studios know that the games that they're making will go to PC. They will probably just build in the work as they're going from the beginning, and maybe that'll still take some time in the transition for games that began before that policy. But going forward, 100%, they'll start doing more quickly. Pokemon and Scarlet and Violet sold over 10 million units within the first 3 days of release. This happened basically right after our episode, the last episode last week, but I just wanted to touch on it because it's just such a big number. This comes from Jenny Zhang at GameSpot. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet had a fantastic launch with a record-setting amount of sales, and that's according to Nintendo, which said Pokemon Scarlet and Violet sold over 10 million units worldwide in just 3 days after its release on November 18th. That makes it the fastest-selling Nintendo game, which I can't think. When I hear that, I'm like, that probably means it's probably one of the fastest-selling games ever. Period through a 3 day period, right? It's even counting Call of Duties and GTAs, I don't think they do 10 million in 3 days, and not in just raw sales.
Yeah, this is a phenomenon, I think, that might stand for at least a little while, because obviously we're at this stage of the console cycle as well, right? Where, which facilitates this to happen.
Yes.
There are 110 million Switches out there. It's the big Christmas in the Switches, 6th year. Brand new Pokemon game, which come kind of, I guess, every 2 years now, but didn't used to come so often. This is like, you'd be surprised if they got another mainline Pokemon. Maybe they'll just scrape the end on Switch, but so this is like a perfect storm from that point of view. And the numbers, as you say, are pretty mad. Like, I mean, in Japan, I'm just reading a headline, 96% of Japan's top 10 physical games last week were Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. 96%.
Yep. It's really, it kind of speaks to what's happened this year, where there are big games that are just bigger than everything else by a wide margin, whether that was Elden Ring or God of War, and now Pokemon. And then I think there's that wide gulf, and everything else is pretty small comparatively. But the big games are continuing to get bigger, and that's true of Pokemon, which every single new generation has outsold the generation before, and that's continued here as well. I think Pokemon's just in a special case where it continues to attract new generations of children, while also not losing many of the older gamers that it has attracted along the way. People that have been playing for 20, 25 years. Many of them still show up for every single new one and don't want to miss out on it. And when you have a property like that, of course, it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. And here we are. It's just an astronomical number.
I mean, I do think it's pretty important for Switch. I was speaking to some analysts recently who were saying how kind of relieved almost they were to see this kind of do these numbers on Switch, because I think there was some trepidation maybe over the last 6 months about,
yes,
is Switch still up to that? I think like some of the recent first party releases maybe didn't do quite what they expected. Like I think Mario Strikers is the one that definitely comes to mind, which I think was disappointing for them.
I think we're going to hear that Bayonetta 3 and Sparks of Hope were both also pretty disappointing. Sparks of Hope, not a first party game, but still a Mario game. I think we're going to hear that those kind of slightly underperformed. So I think that trepidation was well founded until Pokemon. So But clearly, the Switch still has the potential to do this, and nothing else really does. Very few other things, especially
It'd be interesting to
when it
see
comes
how
to
much
a
they've got
console
left.
exclusive.
Because
Yeah.
I mean, the chatter now is that, how much have they got left after Zelda on Switch? I mean, that's the talk that is going around at the moment. That perhaps they haven't got so many huge AAA
What do you think?
releases.
Do you think they have more stuff after Zelda? Because I don't think so.
I mean, I'm speculating based on that.
Right.
Colleague of mine, Christopher Dring, I think reported recently that perhaps there wouldn't be so many kind of huge monsters in 2023 beyond Zelda. Or Zelda's coming in May, is it?
Yes, that's yes, that's right. And I think that's probably. I mean, if there are big monsters coming after Zelda, it's because Nintendo is actually going to put out a follow up to the Switch in the fall, which seems possible, not likely. I really don't know, but possible, not likely is kind of where I'm at with that. But I think the more likely scenario here is Zelda comes out, they ride Zelda for the rest of the year, they have a couple smaller things, and then they do some updates to Nintendo Switch Online, and then they get into early 2024. They launch a Switch successor with a bunch of games ready to go alongside that. They still have a ton of games sitting on the sideline, complete or mostly complete, and they'll probably figure out the best roadmap for that. Some of those will come out on the base Switch. I think a lot of them will get held off for the next Switch.
Yeah, that would be my guess. I totally agree. I mean, you know, and I know, and everyone knows that they've got plenty of games that they kind of usually have set on the shelf to fill gaps. I mean, they've got some games next year. I mean, they've got Pikmin 4, I think is announced, right? But that's not going to sell. Zelda, Splatoon, Pokemon,
right? It'll be 2 million,
years.
3 million copies, and that's going to be really good for a Pikmin. I mean, maybe more than that. I think Pikmin 3 Deluxe did 2-3 million. So this game will probably do a little bit more than that. But yeah, it's not going to be Pokemon, and that's going to be over the course of its entire life. It'll be like a Metroid Dread situation, and that's great. That'll be games for really true big Nintendo fans to play. But when we're talking about Pokemon and Mario and Zelda and Animal Crossing and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and things like that, there's only a handful of those, and I wouldn't expect any other one of those other besides Zelda next year. That's where I'm at. I guess. But man, Mario Team has not. I say that. Mario Team hasn't done anything.
It's been ages.
Well, yeah, but Bowser's Fury. I always Bowser's Fury does exist. That was made by the Mario team, and it's right. And it's that a lot of work went into that, even though it wasn't. Obviously, they knew it wasn't a full experience. It clearly was some sort of not a false start. They put it out, but the start of something for Mario, and they were like, okay, let's essentially abandon it, put it out as it is, make sure it's polished up and good for as a product. But I guess that could have caused them to get sidetracked and not have a new Mario game or new whatever from the Mario team for a little bit longer than it's taking the Zelda team.
And I totally agree. I mean, it feels right from our perspective that early 2024 might be a good time for them to level up, so to speak. And why would you release a new Mario game kind of next fall on Switch rather than kind of plan it for the next one? I mean,
yeah.
So Nintendo do have a history of launch games recently where they kind of straddle the generations, but they're usually Zelda games that have been so delayed. And that's what I was expecting from Tears of the Kingdom. To be honest, I was totally expecting that to be the third Zelda in a row that has kind of moved generation.
The Skyward Sword moved generations.
Twilight Princess.
Yeah, but Skyward Sword came after Twilight Princess, so
we have one in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah. So three out of the last four, right? Yes, exactly. That was what it would have been. But yeah, I mean, I was kind of thinking maybe the same thing could happen, which is why I've been leaning towards maybe a Switch something in Switch Pro, Switch 2 in 2023 is still possible, but nah.
I think we're all bored to tears of speculating about this,
yes.
Especially with what's happened. But I still wouldn't rule out something happening next year on that front. I really wouldn't.
Yeah, but I get it. Yeah, you're right. Everyone's sick of it, or everyone's just. I think they're annoyed by it. They want a new Switch. They want to talk about something when there's something concrete. They're just sick of being jerked around. So yeah. Sonic Frontiers and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe were UK Black Friday's biggest winners, and this comes from what I'm calling the Chris Scullion section of the podcast. This comes from Chris over at VGC. GfK charting data, as reported by GamesIndustry.biz, shows that each game's sales were up more than 200% compared to those of previous weeks, and that's both Sonic Frontiers and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Sonic Frontiers sales rose 203% after numerous retailers dropped the game's price to £30 during Black Friday. This pushed it up the UK physical charts from 10th to 7th. Similarly, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe sales increased 226%, partly due to its inclusion in a Black Friday bundle with Nintendo Switch consoles. This led to a similar jump up the charts from 8th to 4th. Amazon was selling off a Switch bundle that included the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which partly led to that game seeing a 426% increase in sales compared to last week. Despite this, GfK reported that overall sales of physical games during Black Friday were down 15% compared to the same period last year and 10% down from the year before that. I guess I'm just Black Friday's a big deal. These sales are a big deal. I guess if you time them right, it can lead to huge jumps like this. Still, I think it's really impressive for Sonic Frontiers, a game that felt like it could have come and gone and people forgot about already. It turns out a lot of people are just waiting on the sideline, wanting to pick up a new Sonic game, unsure maybe because of some of the back and forth in the reviews, and then once the price was right, a lot of people jumped on it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that they've kind of discounted it so close to release, right? I mean, obviously, I guess they would be mad not to take advantage of Black Friday with its proximity to that. But I mean, £30. I mean, I'm assuming that game retails at full price.
Yes, it does.
So that's a decent discount.
Yep.
So I know, it's not the most surprising story in the world, is it? Discounted games sell loads.
Yes.
During Black Friday. I think there was another US story that we're coming to. Have you put that one? Then I'm not going to talk about it then.
Well, let's do it. Xbox Series X was one of Black Friday's top products, it's claimed. Also from Chris over at VGC. The Xbox Series X was one of the most sought-after devices during Black Friday, it's been claimed. A 2022 holiday shopping trends report published by Adobe, which does this every year, has been updated to include its findings for last week's Black Friday sales. According to the report, the Xbox Series X was one of 5 quote-unquote hot products during Black Friday. The other 4 were children's show Bluey, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, drones, and MacBooks. Adobe hasn't specified how it defines a quote-unquote hot product, nor has it explained what factors it looks into account when determining what makes the Series X more of a hot product than, say, the Series S, PS5, or Switch. However, last year it highlighted the Xbox Series S in a similar report where it claimed the console was among the top-selling items during Black Friday, and last year Adobe said its data came from analyzing 1 trillion visits to retail sites, in addition to surveying over 1,000 retailers on their most popular items. It's not clear if a similar process was used this year. I mean, a little bit surprising, but also it feels like this could be the kind of thing where it's a bunch of factors feeding into one another. The Xbox Series X was likely held back by Microsoft to make sure they had plenty of stock for Black Friday, and that helped them move into this Adobe hot product thing, which has been pretty reliable. I feel like the Xbox Series S last year was pretty high on the MPD chart. I was actually just going to check that, but what do you think's happening here?
Yeah, I agree. I think they've probably held stock specifically for this. With this particular story, actually, we were really careful with wording because obviously it is a bit surprising. And the wording that Adobe has used is hot products.
Yes,
and it's the only device on there, I believe. Xbox Series X.
Right. So I guess the only gaming device. There's MacBooks and drones, but this is the only one of these game devices in the 5 hot products.
So there was a small discount, I believe, in the UK. I think it's £20. I'm not sure what there was an all access discount in the US. It seems. So it was. I mean, if you look at anecdotally, look at Amazon and stuff like that, it was in the top sellers. It's worth kind of comparing this to last year's report where they did kind of explicitly say that Series S was the best selling console, which is kind of what you would expect because there's some incredible Black Friday deals for that now. Like even I'm thinking about getting one and I've already got a Series X, right? Like it's a bargain as a second console. So I do find that surprising, and I'm just a little bit hesitant to dive head first into this story and say that it kind of suggests that it might have been the best-selling console because it just seems like the wording's a bit clever here.
Right.
So I'm going to wait for more data.
Yeah, clearly, you're right to be careful about the wording. Hot product in general probably just means it's something was getting a lot of searches, was getting a lot of attention on websites when it was being served up to people. People are considering it. It doesn't mean that a lot of people converted. I think that it's I bet a lot of people did buy Xbox Series X's, but I bet a lot of people bought PlayStation 5s and Xbox Series S's and Switches. And really, if you were to go and make a bet on what is going to be top in the NPD report for November, this might help a little bit. It's not going to tell you the full story, though. And I'm not going to be surprised if we get like the report and it's, Switch was the number one selling in terms of hardware actually sold. PlayStation 5 was number one in terms of dollars. Xbox was right behind that and really close, but a lot of people bought Xbox Series S's, which dragged down the overall average sales price. Like, that's probably going to be the story or something along those lines. So, that doesn't mean, I'm sure the Xbox Series X was still a very hot product, though.
I mean, I do think this is another indication of the kind of stock issues finally starting to come to a close. I mean, from what I'm hearing, both platform holders now are really confident that that's behind them.
Yes.
And I mean, you kind of saw in Sony's recent kind of financial results that I think they made something more than 6 million consoles in a small quarter, which kind of certainly suggests that those kind of component issues are behind us. So yeah, I mean, maybe we shouldn't be surprised that if it's in stock, then people are going to buy it. That's always been the case up until now, right? Like, if they make them, they will sell them. Exactly.
And I think, both these companies have found their own route to that. I mean, with Microsoft, it's been, I think, kind of brute forcing it and making sure that the yields were pretty good from the start for their components and their systems on a chip, and then working with AMD and TSMC to make sure that they we're getting, again, increasing those yields. And then on Sony's side, it was like, let's make every single possible change we can make right now, right away, to reduce the amount of material we need for this thing, and then to also increase yields by going to a completely new, what was it, I think the 5 nanometer process instead of the 6 nanometer process on the chip, so that we can put more chips on every wafer. And it's like, both of these companies have found their own path towards getting there, but now clearly they're both there. And again, I always go back to that timing of the Sony increasing the price. It's like they did it right at the last moment they could, because going forward, people are going to be able to find PlayStation 5s. And then that sense, they're like, well, the prices increased, but at least I'm giving the money to Sony instead of to a scalper. That would have dissipated relatively quickly. But when they did it, that sentiment was still very high. So they pulled the ripcord on that right when they could. All right, last story here. One last one from the Chris Scullion trilogy. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's online RNG move accuracy is rigged, players claim. A Pokemon Scarlet and Violet player has claimed that the game's online multiplayer battles are fundamentally flawed. The Battle Stadium mode, where players can take on others from around the world, reportedly uses the same RNG seed for each battle, according to Twitter user Sabuna Switch. What this essentially means in practice is that the random numbers the game calculates for things like move accuracy are the same every time. As a result, players can theoretically use this knowledge to know when to perform powerful moves with low accuracy. As explained in a Twitch video by Hopcat Smash, and this is a quote, for example, if on the first run of a match, you use a move that's less than 91% accurate, it always misses. And if you know when things are going to miss, you can work out when things are going to hit. If you use Fake Out and then straight away use Sheer Cold, a move that only usually has a 30% chance to hit, and always one-shots your opponent, it's guaranteed to hit. So basically what they're saying here is this mode is unplayable for anyone who's paying attention to any of this stuff, which is going to be a lot of the audience. Like the people that play these in-game modes where you're battling your Pokemon against other people are the people trying to min-max every single thing. And this is something you just couldn't ignore if you're trying to go there. You can't pretend this doesn't exist because it's going to ruin your experience. What the hell is wrong with this game? How does this stuff happen? I don't get it, Andy. What's happening?
I feel bad, like, kind of laying in, putting the boot in, because you know what?
Sure.
I've been playing it with my kids for the last week, and I've been absolutely loving it. I used to be a big Pokemon fan back in the day. I've kind of not played a mainline one for a good couple of years now, and I've been really enjoying it, and they love it. And yeah, it looks like us. Like, it looks like it looks like an iPad game from 10 years ago.
Do the kids care though?
No, they don't care, and
Yeah,
I don't really care. And I don't actually think, going in with that expectation that it looks shite, I don't think the kind of performance issues were as bad as, like, say, Cyberpunk was on on the last gen consoles.
Yeah.
This is Game Freak are interesting, right? Because they've got the biggest property in entertainment. They've always been a kind of a 2D game developer. If you remember, in kind of about 5 years ago, they had the Gear Project, I think it's called, where they were making all these original games. Right? I can't even remember half of them. Like one of them, you done me on Jeopardy for one of them. I think it was Tembo, the
Yeah,
badass
Timbo, the battle
yeah,
elephant or whatever. Yeah, the
that's it.
badass elephant.
And Giga Wrecker, I think one of
Yeah,
them was called. These like original games
yeah.
where,
Well, there's
and
a
I actually visited Game Freak right before VGC launched. I did like a tour of some Japanese developers, and I went out and visited them. And the creative director of that game, Giga Wrecker, who's one of the main programmers on Pokemon, he said the reason they started making those games was to train their staff for Pokemon to make these HD games. Like,
yep.
we can't screw up on Pokemon, so we're going to go and make these original games and gain the value experience of not just 3D games, but also being directors, way of promoting staff, and then feed that back in. So, I mean, they were criticized with Sword and Shield, right? Because they were reusing
Yes.
models, which I don't think was fair criticism. And that game didn't look great either. It really didn't. I mean, there was criticism of how that game looked. However, I do think they do deserve some credit that they've released two massive, like really good mainline Pokemon games as well in the space of 1 year, which they've never done before, even
Yeah.
to my knowledge, in 2D. Both of these games are great, right? They have big performance issues and they look like arse, but they're great games. You would have thought that it's easier to rectify one of those than the other.
Yeah, I think that listen, the final state of these games, especially this most recent one, it is, I think, inexcusable. I think it's regardless of the excuses that I think are fair, they don't rise to sort of justifying the state of the game. And yet, I also think that it should be easy enough for most people to move. Like, if you care about these games and you're like, and you could find the fun in them, you will find the fun in them. This is something they probably will patch out. It is, it's worthy of a news story. It's worthy of bringing up here and saying that this is this is weird. It shouldn't work this way. It's broken. This is a good place to, like, the news is a good place to do that. You could try to like wait to do your reviews until you know all this information. But I was like, no, let's just put it in the news. And we'll keep this as a story at the top of mind, so people know, like, there is a lot to criticize here. And yet, I think like almost zero children are gonna encounter these issues that mess a part of the audience. They are finding a lot of fun, and I think a lot of longtime fans are also just kind of coming in mostly casually and finding a lot of fun. And again, not to excuse them, it's inexcusable, but
and I would say few companies take quality assurance as seriously, over 30, 40 years than Nintendo.
yeah.
So I would say from that perspective, any fans worried that the sales, kind of might encourage this behavior, I don't think that's the case. I think Nintendo will be as pissed off about this as anyone.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be hard for them to feel too sad with all the money. They'll be busy endorsing checks repeatedly. But yes, I think they will want to do something for the next game, and this won't be like. I bet the next game will be shoring up in a lot of key ways. There will be other new issues because it is Game Freak. There's always new problems with their games. But I think the next one will probably visually be much better and just performative in a lot of more key ways. All right, let's get to the poll questions. Let's do this right now. Let me bring this up. Let me hit the transition button. All right, on Wednesday of last week, I asked, do we ever see a real AAA game release from Netflix? We brought this up because they have a team there that's working on AAA games. They're hiring up. They kind of described it a little bit. It's in the process. But we've heard similar things from Amazon and Google, and there was a lot of reasons to be skeptical there. I'm a little bit less skeptical of Netflix, but the general audience seems to mostly still think that the AAA game is out of their reach. Only 11.6% said yes, while 52.8% said no. The remainder, 35.6% said it's going to be like a AA game, which I think is probably the most likely scenario here, where Netflix does put a lot of effort into it, probably does hire up, but they're not going to bring on 500 people in total to work on a game. At least I don't think so. They make a lot of movies, and that stuff is very expensive for them, but they can make a game that's like a real modern AAA game for the same cost it would take to make several movies, and I think they would probably balk at that. But what do you think, Andy? Do you think Netflix comes out as a real juggernaut in the AAA space at any point in their future?
We've been here so many times before, haven't we?
Mm-hmm.
Like, certainly if they're going to try and assemble a team, that's that's not easy at all, right? I mean, we're looking at how Microsoft's been struggling to assemble teams internally over 10 years, like one of the most prominent players in video games. So yeah, I'd be very skeptical about how well they're going to do unless they're going to go out and just, I think they've made some smart acquisitions recently, actually,
Yes.
but unless they're going to do that on a larger scale, I don't. I mean, it's just it's difficult not to be cynical, right? Looking at how Amazon kind of fared at the start, but as you say, they'll be looking at the budgets required, but they'll also be looking at how much money these kind of live service games are making, over a long time. And undoubtedly, that's what's kind of piqued their curiosity to look over the fence. So I'll be following it with interest like everyone else, but also cynicism.
I think it's like I said, a little bit easier to have some confidence here by they're slowly building up, like how they are approaching games. You mentioned they made some smart acquisitions. They've been smaller teams, and they've been like, hey, you're going to fit into our model of putting out like story-based games where you can kind of almost just play with your TV remote. And that's like, okay, they aren't just rushing straight to trying to do the AAA thing. They aren't pretending to be something they're not. They are going to build themselves into something they're not today and maybe could be in the future. And so it's like, okay, that's probably the right way to go about it. And I mean, you're right. They peeked over the fence, but they also like looked at their data and saw how many people are watching The Witcher. And then they saw how much money everyone else was making off the hype that Netflix was creating for that thing. And like, well, we need to put ourselves in the process or somewhere in that chain where we can create the hype and then cash in on the hype with a video game.
And it works the other direction, right? I mean, they've got their own IP, their own huge IP. I mean, just even for one moment, just imagine if the game they're making is a big live service Stranger Things game.
Yeah.
And you could see that hitting off, right? Even if it's like, 7 out of 10-ish.
Yeah.
That's a game people will play.
Yeah.
It's coming back to what I said earlier, making a game based on an existing property, perhaps has a slightly more clear roadmap on the gestation period. That makes sense. That could work.
I think so too. All right, let's do a new poll here for Wednesday. Excuse me. We'll have the Bombcast tomorrow. We'll be back another episode on Wednesday. Let's not do it as a reply there. Is Street Fighter 6 releasing by, let's say, spring? By spring. I think that's probably the good over-under there. And let's go with Game Mess Mornings. And while I finish this, Andy, where can people find you?
You can find me at videogameschronicle.com, or my Twitter handle is @AndyPlatonic.
I want to thank you so much for hanging out with me today, man. This was really great. You are fantastic. It's great to talk these news stories out with you. I really appreciate it. Let's set this for 2 days. In the meantime, Giant Bomb, we're going to go, like I said, on Mondays, it's always meetings. We're going to go do our meeting. I will find out what's going on for the rest of this week. But you can look forward to some returning shows. I think we'll probably be finishing Eternal Darkness this week. There will be a voicemail dump truck. We'll have Unprofessional Fridays. I found a couple of games I want to play with the crew. We'll go in the meeting. We'll talk about it, see if we can figure out when we're going to do those. I might do a grubby stream today, although I didn't get much sleep last night, so I might also go crash after this. We'll see. Yeah, with all that said, thank you everybody for watching. I really appreciate it. You're the best audience in gaming. Andy, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Until next time, everybody, have a good one. Take care of yourself, and goodbye.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.